Peru hit the 2 month mark since the impeachment of former President Pedro Castillo, which has led to massive protests and more than 60 deaths due to police repression as the political crisis worsens. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan visited the areas affected by the earthquake that struck southeastern Turkey and northwestern Syria on Monday. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky requested again to the United Kingdom for fighter jets to use against Russia during his official visit to that nation. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. On Tuesday, Peru hit the 2 month mark since the impeachment of former President Pedro Castillo, which has led to massive protests and more than 60 deaths due to police repression as the political crisis worsens. When on December 7, former President Pedro Castillo was ousted and Dina Boluarte took office as head of state, she said she would remain in office until 2026, something that helped ignite the streets in various parts of the country. The massive marches against the government in various parts of the country were not enough for the executive and legislative to call for early elections, announce resignations, show any self-criticism, or make an effort to dialogue with the demonstrators to calm the situation. Rather, the government has tightly clung to its position, disregarding the people's request as the social and political crisis becomes even deeper. Brazilian President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva travels to Washington on Thursday to put Brazil's relationship with his U.S. counterpart Joe Biden back on track after it was disrupted during the mandate of the far-right former President Jair Bolsonaro. Almost a month after assuming his third term as president, Lula will be received by Biden on Friday afternoon at the White House. The most remarkable thing about the visit is its political character, the symbolic fact that it occurs at the beginning of President Lula's term in office, said Michel Arcelin Neto, head of the Latin American Caribbean Department of the Brazilian Foreign Ministry. According to the White House, Biden and Lula will address strong U.S. support for Brazilian democracy and common challenges such as climate change, food security, economic development, strengthening peace and security, and regional migration. The Dominican Medical Association leads a march on Wednesday in the province of Barahona to protest against the health risk insurance companies as part of demands for reforms in the social security system. The president of the National Social Security Council, Dr. Senen Caba, emphasized that workers demand a social security system that compensates the population with a health plan that at least approaches the 70% of coverage established by law. At the same time, the doctors denounced that the authorities ignored the request to increase the $142 quota for the purchase of medicines, as well as the request to include patients with mental disorders and disabilities in the coverage. The Dominican Teachers Association, the Enriquillo Coalition, the University Employees Association, and the Federation of Dominican Students, among other unions, are participating in the march. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, begins an official visit to Haiti on Wednesday in response to a government invitation. During his stay, Turk will meet with representatives of the state, the Office of Citizen Protection, as well as with security forces and the judiciary. He will also meet with victims of human rights violations and civil organizations. Likewise, UN officials is said to visit Unaminthe, a city in the northeast of the country, to hold meetings with local authorities and various platforms. Turk's trip to Haiti comes at a time when the multifaceted national crisis is worsening, as armed groups control vast areas of the capital and the number of kidnappings and murders increase in the country. On Tuesday, the president of the National Electoral Council of Ecuador, Diana Atamain, informed that 6 provinces are undergoing vote recounting due to errors in tally sheets at the sectional elections on Sunday. In a press conference, Atamain explained that a problem in the printing of the tally sheets caused the provincial electoral rolls to recount votes for mayors and prefects in Cañar, Loja, Santa Elena, Napo, Morona, Santiago, and Zamora Chinchipe. She added that some data was being wrongfully assigned among the candidates and pointed out that she had requested a special examination to the Comptroller's office to track the mistakes. Ecuador's former president Rafael Correa considered that the no triumph in the constitutional referendum, together with the positive results obtained by the political movement Revolución Ciudadana in the sectional elections, constitute a clear recall message to Ecuadorian President Guillermo Lasso. In an interview granted to the Argentine news agency TELAM, Correa pointed out that there is great popular indignation and described as cynical the government's call to build a national agreement to address the critical situation of the country. The former president affirmed that the Ecuadorian constitution establishes mechanisms for revocation or anticipating the elections by collecting 15% of the signatures of the electoral roll, but it requires the approval of the National Electoral Council, which is an accomplice of Lasso. Correa highlighted the good performance of Revolución Ciudadana and his possibilities in the presidential elections of 2025, despite the political violence that hit the campaign. Let's take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at the account at teleSUR English, in which you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the South. United States President Joe Biden delivered on Tuesday the State of the Union address before the nation's Congress. In an over 3-hour speech mostly devoted to domestic issues, the U.S. President began by listing a number of what he considered achievements of his administration during the last 2 years and the work ahead. He announced a new standard that would require that all construction material used in federal infrastructure projects be made in the United States. Biden also criticized the fiscal management of former President Donald Trump's administration and called for bipartisan work in Congress to move ahead. The head of state referred to the need for gun control and his policies on immigration. In relation to the international arena, the president made a brief reference to the conflict in Ukraine and the relations with China. During his midterm speech, U.S. President Biden reiterated the policy of confrontation with China and Russia. While delivering the State of the Union, Biden maintained his position of continuing to support Ukraine's confrontation with Russia. He pointed out that the increase in inflation in his country derives from the armed conflict and blamed Moscow for sabotaging U.S. economy. The U.S. President also made reference to the shooting down of the Chinese civilian unmanned aircraft in the past week and stated that he would always defend the country against an alleged attempt to violate its sovereignty. Biden was booed by some members of Congress who accused him of lying, an unprecedented event in the history of State of the Union speeches. The U.S. prevented the entry of over 4,000 kilograms of fentanyl into its territory, according to what Tim Burchett, a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, reported on Tuesday. 3,265 kilograms of the synthetic narcotic opioid were seized at the country's southern border. According to the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, a dose of just 2 milligrams is considered potentially lethal, making fentanyl a drug 50 times more potent than heroin and 100 times more potent than morphine. More than 379 million potentially deadly doses of the substance were seized last year alone, enough to kill every U.S. citizen. The Bureau said in December, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, nearly 107,000 U.S. citizens died as a result of an overdose in 2021, indicating a 16% increase from 2020, and the main cause was consumption of fentanyl. The Reserve Bank of India increased its key interest rate, the repo rate, by 25 basis points on Wednesday and lowered its growth and inflation projections. The central bank said that its policy stance remains focused on the withdrawal of accommodation, with 4 out of 6 members voting in favor of that position. The repo rate is the interest banks pay to borrow from the central bank, and an increase in that rate makes banks raise their lending charges. The latest is the 6th consecutive rate hike, taking the Reserve Bank's key rate to 6.50%. In China, Andrew Xia, opposition leader in the Taiwan Special Administrative Region, will visit Beijing on Wednesday to discuss various issues with the central government. The political leader, who heads a delegation of the Taiwanese opposition party, will visit Beijing and other regions of China between February 8th and the 17th. During this period, Andrew Xia will meet Song Tao, director of the Chinese Executive's Taiwan Affairs Bureau, The Taiwanese political leader will discuss the situation of agricultural and fishing enterprises in the special administrative region with the Chinese central government and will also attend several conferences. The Chinese executive, defending its two-system country stance, advocates dialogue to resolve differences with Taiwan. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un called for strengthening the country's military as he paid tribute to soldiers and met with troops at an event ahead of the 75th founding anniversary of the country's army. During the banquet held at the lodging quarters of the Korean People's Army's general officers, Kim lauded his troops as the strongest army in the world. At the event, where the North Korean leader was accompanied by his wife and daughter, he praised the state's military tradition that persisted through the decades to achieve a great and absolute power. We have more news coming up after a final short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan visited on Wednesday the areas affected by the earthquake that struck southeastern Turkey and northwestern Syria on Monday, described as the most violent in recent decades. Speaking to the press, the president acknowledged the difficulties in accessing some places due to the poor condition of the roads because of the damage suffered as well as the prevailing low temperatures. Erdogan reported that in Turkey the dead were over 9,000 and the injured 52,000. The fatalities are so far close to 12,000 in both countries, while the injured total more than 54,000, and as the hours pass, these figures increase considerably. The rescue teams continue their work to try to save the people trapped under the rubble in a fight against time to find them alive. During a press conference on his first visit to the earthquake-hit area in southern Turkey, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said that the situation is under control.
We have mobilized all our means. The state has been, is, and will be carrying out rescue works together with the municipalities with all its means, especially with the coordination of the Disaster and Emergency Management Presidency. On the first day, of course, there were some difficulties, but then on the second day and today, the situation was under control, and from now on, our work on the debris is continuing, but on the other hand, our Ministry of Environment and Urbanization will hopefully start the cleanup.
On Thursday, North Korea's State Affairs Chairman Kim Jong-un sent a message of condolences to his Syrian counterpart Bashar al-Assad following Monday's 7.8 magnitude earthquake in the northwest region of the country. Kim Jong-un expressed deep sorrow and sympathy to the Syrian people on behalf of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. The North Korean official expressed the conviction that under the right guidance of Bashar al-Assad, the Syrian government and people will stabilize the lives of the injured and eliminate the consequences of these natural disasters as soon as possible. He also took the opportunity to express firm solidarity with the just struggle of the Syrian people for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of their country. Syrian Foreign Minister Faisal al-Mekdad announced on Wednesday that the blockade and sanctions imposed by the Western powers are preventing the arrival of medicines and humanitarian aid following the devastating earthquake that hit the country on Monday. While U.S. officials claim that their measures do not affect humanitarian assistance, Syrian head of diplomacy stated in reality they prevent the needed supplies, such as medicines, for reaching the country. He added that Washington and its Western allies order other governments around, threatening them with sanctions if they negotiate with Syria, thus exacerbating the tragedy of local people. According to the foreign minister, the catastrophe of the earthquake, which has so far killed at least 2,662 people, is immense, and what has increased its death are the difficult circumstances the country has been going through for the past 12 years with its constant struggle against terrorism and its supporters. The authorities in Honduras registered a 5.9 magnitude earthquake on the Richter scale this Wednesday morning. According to the preliminary data, the earthquake was also felt in Belize, El Salvador, Guatemala, Nicaragua, and Mexico. Honduras Permanent Contingencies Committee said the earthquake occurred 29 kilometers off Roatan Island in the Bay Island. Local residents said the earthquake lasted about 10 seconds, causing panic among citizens. The Honduran Fire Department reports that so far no damage has been reported in any of the affected areas. On Wednesday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky requested the UK Parliament once again for fighter jets to fight against Russia. During his first visit to the United Kingdom since the start of the Iran conflict on February 2022, Zelensky made the request while addressing the British Parliament and proclaimed that Russia will lose the war. He also emphasized the importance of the artillery and air defense coalition to stop the Russian military offensive. In this context, with the slogan "Planes for Ukraine, Wings for Freedom," the president pointed out the need for Western powers to provide fighters and additional support to defend themselves in the air.
I trust this symbol will help us for our next coalition of the planes, and I appeal to you and the world with simple and yet most important words: combat aircrafts for Ukraine, wings for freedom.
Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud called on Wednesday for an end to armed clashes in a dispute town controlled by the separatist Somaliland region, in which 24 people were killed and 54 others wounded. The town of Las Anod in the Sul region is disputed by the semi-autonomous region of Puntland, loyal to Mogadishu and Somaliland, which separated from the rest of the national territory in 1991, but with little international recognition. In an official statement, the Somali president said that the contending forces should cease fighting, lay down their arms, and start negotiating peace immediately, as the reason for the confrontation is only political. Somaliland has governed the Sul region since 2008 after the secession from Puntland. Somalia is considered a divided country without an effective central government and dominated by clans and warlords since 1991, when allied militias overthrew then President Mohamed Said Barre, who was supported by the army. We've come to the end of this news briefing. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also join us on social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.